Inflation, as you know, has been a concern over the past few years. It has been high, has been cooling off in the past few months. Do you expect inflation to be nudged back up because of this event?
I don't know about inflation per se, but the cost associated with this for those organizations who ship through the port or that now have to send their trucks around the extra 15 miles, that is added cost. So yeah, in a roundabout way, that's inflation, but you won't have that same extra cost at other areas. The Port of LA isn't going to have these increased costs. So it'll be interesting to see how companies deal with that. Will it just be, will they take and peanut butter spread that out and make it inflation because they have to absorb it? Probably so. But I wouldn't directly relate it to inflation per se. It is a cost hit that they have to absorb. And they may choose to send that over and pass it along to the consumers. Now, do keep in mind, Brittany, what goes through that port? It's not a lot of goods, right? The Port of Baltimore only has about 1.1 million TEUs, 20-foot equivalent containers. That's small in the grand scheme of things. Just to the north, New York, New Jersey, 4 million, LA, 9 million. So the total amount of containers that came in and went through ports last year was about 47 million. This is only 1.1 million. So you're not seeing that huge of an impact. Yes, there's an impact, but the other ports are going to be able to absorb this. But it will increase some cost associated with those reroutings.
When you see a supply chain disruption, that is, you're looking at the bright side here. It's not as bad as it would be if it were other ports. But how long does this last? How long will this disrupt the supply chain?
That is a great question. And I think that has to really depend on how long they can clear the debris. And I'm not an engineer, I'm not there on site, so I don't know about that. I can tell you when the Minneapolis Bridge collapsed in 2007, we have done extensive research on this. I actually wrote a lot about the Minneapolis Bridge. They were able to go from the collapse to having a bridge fully functioning, up and running in 13 months. So it is possible to move fast when people collaborate, when we get past the bureaucracies and hierarchy, but I don't know the exact situation of how long it's going to clear the debris. So clearing the debris is going to help open up that port again. That's going to be a game changer, right? But now I have to rebuild the bridge. So rebuilding the bridge, the best case, like Minneapolis, 13 months. Worst case, gosh, they just did a bridge not too far away that connected Maryland, and I forget which one it was, the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. 13 years. And so the average time it takes to rebuild a bridge is about between 3 and 7 years. So
that's a big discrepancy. That's a big discrepancy there. 13 months and 13 years. The average time, 5 to 7, is what you're saying, 5 to 7 years. So who should be involved in the rebuild? Because I'm sure it looked a lot different for the 13-month build opposed to the 13-year build.
Well, I am so glad you asked that, because this is actually one of the things that I personally study is how can we make get our supply chains to move so fast to do these rebuilds? And the laws of our country enable that. And I think one thing that Biden is doing that's going to be helpful is he's already said money's off the table, we're going to pay for it. But then you have the bureaucracy of the procurement process. Now, in the state of Minnesota, they were able to declare it a disaster. That allowed them to move a bit faster. But it was actually the process that they used through their bid process that was a game changer. So they used a best value technique. They also used a design build process. So when you actually looked and researched their bid, they went to industry. They went to the construction companies and said, hey, I've got a problem. What's the quickest, fastest, cheapest way I can rebuild this bridge? And amazing how innovative the construction companies were. The traditional approach gosh, I have to have a plan and I have to draw up a thing, and right. And so our process that we typically use is very protracted and very hierarchical. It does not have to be. And so my challenge would be, I hope that the state of Maryland looks at what is the art of the possible and what Minnesota did, because 13 months under budget, Brittany, under budget, and it won almost a dozen awards. That's the art of the possible. And so let's not get wrapped up into hierarchy and bureaucracy. We know how to rebuild these bridges safely, quickly, and affordable.